Hi, everybody, and welcome to our discussion today about how to select and pay for college. My name is Melissa Bassett, and I head up in-school lending here at SoFi. I've been in education finance for over 20 years, helping families plan, prepare, and choose a college. And I feel like I'm an expert because I have two children currently in college, yet going to class in their bedrooms right now. I'm joined today by Sabrina Manville from a company called Edmit here in Boston. Sabrina is the co-founder of Edmit and an author of a book called Better Off After College. Sabrina, welcome. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Thanks so much. So I'm the co-founder of Edmit, as Melissa said, and our company's mission is to help families make smart financial decisions about college. I personally have worked in higher education, both inside universities and outside of universities for most of my career. And we founded the company because we saw how difficult it was for families to understand how much they're going to pay for college, how they're going to pay, how much student loan debt is too much, and also just how to think about college a little bit like an investment, which has outcomes and kind of career returns in the same way that other big investments do. So we have software, we have a lot of guides and other tools, as well as human advisors that you can speak to at every step of this process, which can be a little bit overwhelming for families, especially right now.
For sure. And, it's such a complementary type of service that you offer to what we do here at SoFi, which is to help our members and families on their financial journey. How can we give them both digital and in-person tools to help them select a college, pay for college, plan for college? And so that's why we chose a partnership with Edmit and come jointly to you guys today to talk about some of the topics about going to school, selecting a school, and paying for school in kind of this uncertain and very different time. Things don't follow the traditional path. For example, like decision day. Decision day is such a big deal in a family's life, having graduated or getting ready to graduate from college, and then depositing by May 1st for the college of their choice. Serena, what do you think about this now? Like, what is decision day for our audience, and how is this year different?
Yeah, so like you said, May 1st has historically been decision day, and that's the day that everyone has to decide where they're going to go and put in a deposit that kind of commits them to a school. What's different this year, first of all, is that a lot of colleges have changed that deadline either to May 15th or June 1st. And a lot of students have actually asked for extensions in cases where colleges have not changed the deadline. So there are still a lot of people, even though you'll be viewing this after May 1st, who are trying to decide where to go and not sure where they'll be in the fall. And so while decision day is typically a big day of celebration, sigh of relief that this whole process is over and a path forward has been chosen, this year it's a little bit different because there's a lot more uncertainty.
For sure. And Sabrina, what advice do you have for families that have made a deposit, say at a school for early decision, and have deposited at that school, but now because family financial situations may have changed with a furlough or a layoff, and they can no longer afford that choice, what's your recommendation for families in that situation?
So definitely, if you are still deciding, or if you have already decided but something's changed, it's really important to reach out to the colleges that you're considering, to let them know that there's been a change and that maybe you may have difficulties paying for college, for example. I think even in the case that you've put down a deposit, a lot of colleges and universities are anticipating that families will have had changes, and so there's likely to be a lot more movement over the summer even than there is traditionally. So that's the first thing I would say, is that if you're having questions about whether you can afford to go, the first step is to talk to the college and university to see if there's additional aid available. I think you should also be considering the reality that the college may not be open in the fall and you may be taking courses online. Currently, there's a lot of announcements coming out about colleges deciding to go online or deciding to stay online through the summer, or putting a stake in the ground that they're going to be back in the fall. But I think the reality is that no one knows what's going to happen, and it may not be up to college presidents, that the kids can come back. So I think it's important to have a discussion with your family about what happens if you learn that the school you've committed to is going to be online. How does that change how you're feeling about it, and what you're willing to pay for? And then the last thing is that colleges are struggling themselves, right? So the same way that a lot of families are undergoing financial stress, colleges will be undergoing financial stress. There's going to be dips in enrollment because a lot of students probably will decide that they can't go, or decide to go to a less expensive school. Colleges can rely on endowments, which are likely to be down. And obviously public universities rely on state support, which is in question in many ways. International students are not going to be coming in the same numbers. And so the last thing I'd say is just think about your college and whether it's vulnerable in those ways, because that could be an important determinant of what your experience looks like in the fall as well.
So Sabrina, what do you think is the best way to approach getting your financial aid package reevaluated? Because some of these disruptions to income could be temporary, a few months to a few quarters. Should families call the school? Should they write a letter? What's your best suggestion in that regard?
So I always tell families to first place a call to the school's financial aid office, because the process really changes from school to school. And actually a lot of colleges have put in special processes because of coronavirus, because there's going to be so many of these appeals that they might have different forms or a process or a different department that's dealing with it. So first place a call and learn if there's any if there are specific measures that you should be taking for that school. But I also do recommend writing a letter to summarize, putting something in writing. Even if there's also a form that you're filling out, putting something in writing about why you're really committed to the school, why you're having difficulties, and put kind of a human face on it, because at the end of the day, the people that are reading and evaluating these requests are people, and they're going to be trying to understand what kind of help you need, and how well they can support you.
Based on what, even before the coronavirus, based on your experience in higher education, how are families paying for college nowadays? Both pre and post COVID, are there some trends or suggestions that you would offer when approaching paying for college and looking at 4 years?
Yes, I think the most clear trend is that there's a growing awareness that there's a lot of merit scholarships in addition to financial aid. And so while families may think, oh, I'm not going to qualify for any aid, then they realize that there's actually a lot of colleges that will give them scholarship money and reduce the cost for them. It's kind of like a discount. And so a lot of families that are kind of in the middle, where they can't afford to pay full price but also won't qualify for a lot of aid, are looking for colleges that are going to be generous with them. So that's one thing I would say is that families are looking for the free money and trying to find the colleges whose financial aid strategies are kind of aligned with that. Mm-hmm. In terms of loans, I think most students take loans first for undergraduate studies. And in addition, there's more and more parents taking on debt for college. That's something we're a little bit concerned about at Edmit, because that puts the whole family is kind of on the hook when you introduce parent loans, and parents are often usually co-signing private loans as well. And so that's why we're encouraging families to really think about the cost benefit of taking on a lot of debt to go to college.
That's actually a great point. In terms of borrowing and debt levels, what do you suggest, to families when they're looking at how much can I afford? What's a good rule of thumb there?
Yeah, the rule of thumb we use is, well, first I'll say that this is a family decision that is pretty, that depends a lot on your values and preferences and kind of risk tolerance. But the benchmark we use is that you should look at your first year salary that you're projecting after college, and not borrow more than that amount for all 4 years. So what that rule of thumb does is kind of gives you a different picture if you're going to be a social worker versus a engineer, right? Like an engineer is going to, if you're really gunning to be an engineer, you're likely to make a higher salary. And so you may be more comfortable taking a little more debt for that school you really want to go to. Whereas if you're probably going to stay maybe in the nonprofit world, or you're not sure, you maybe leaning towards something less lucrative, you may be a little more risk averse and want to limit those loans. So I think taking your future plans into effect, just as far as you can tell. I know a lot of things change, but think about that future and calibrate accordingly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Shifting back to the admission side of things, what's the best way for students and families to stay engaged with either the school that they plan to attend, or for those families that are still kind of thinking about where's the best place for my child to go, now that campuses are closed and they can't go there physically?
It's a big challenge. One of the good news is that a lot of colleges have quickly shifted to offer virtual events, career services, and admissions events and things like that online. And so you can often actually go to the website and sign up for one of those, or take a virtual tour of the campus so you can see kind of how it feels and see what the campus looks like. We recommend a couple of other things. First is to try to talk to people. First, talk to people that are students currently, or recent students, and they can speak to their experience there better than what's on the website of the college. And that's kind of a little more of the human touch that you would get on a tour, and give you a little more information. And you can also call the school itself. You can call academic departments, you can call the career services office, obviously admissions and financial aid, and try to talk to people to get your questions answered, to get a little more information. So I think there's a lot of ways to do the research from afar, even though obviously it's a little bit hard to replace the in-person experience.
Yeah, and I think your recommendation to reach out to someone that's already on campus, or perhaps a student or alumni, is a great idea. I know that when both of my kids were going to school, we were so nervous, excited, looking probably at the wrong things. Oh, the library is new, or the gym is fantastic, when we probably should have been asking questions like, what's the weekend life here? Does everyone go home, or do they stay? Is
Yeah.
housing guaranteed for 4 years? Everyone always encourages freshmen to join clubs, to meet people. Find out, would be my recommendation in advance, what clubs there are, and are they of interest to you? I think that one-on-one with students and asking kind of the non-traditional questions versus getting blinded by, can we see the dorm room? Everybody wants to run to the dorm room and kind of picture themselves there. But I think being virtual gives families the opportunity to ask maybe deeper questions or more specific questions, and take some of that excitement, anxiety out of, the choices you have to make when you're on the campus.
Yeah, and it gives you kind of that unvarnished view, like you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. Standardized test, another kind of big change. We've heard that, some SATs, ACTs canceled, online, maybe postponed. Talk to us a little bit about what you're hearing.
Yeah, so like you're saying, that I think there's been a lot of cancellations and postponements of dates, and so a lot of current juniors are wondering when they're going to be able to take the test, if they're going to be able to take the tests. And obviously that's usually an important part of the college admissions process, because it gives you a sense for where you might get in, what scholarships you might be eligible for. So it's a little stressful. I think there is talk of hosting the tests at home or online. I'm not sure how that's going to pan out. What I would say is to focus on what you can control, which is not whether the ACT will happen, but your other stuff, your courses, whatever kind of activities or extracurriculars you can still be involved in, personal development and growth, like all those things are going to reflect well on your college applications. And colleges know that they're going to need to be more flexible this coming cycle just for a host of reasons. So I don't think anyone's going to get penalized for some of the changes that are out of their control, like the tests or the kind of pass-fail grading and things like that that are going on.
Yeah, and because I know some of the schools have already moved away from standardized tests, but from what you guys have seen in some of your research, how does submitting the scores and not submitting the scores play into your application for schools that are optional? And same question, like if schools say, well, everyone says it's completely optional, should you try to find a way to take it even if it's online?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the answer might be a little bit different this year than it has been in the past. So there's always been this thing called test optional, where there's a set of universities that basically say, if you don't want to submit scores, you don't need to. And that list has been growing, and now it's like much longer because they know that it's going to be much harder to take the test. That said, in the past, if you've taken the tests and have strong grades, it's not going to hurt your application. In fact, it may well help it to submit them. And there are still scholarships out there that require a certain minimum SAT or ACT score. And so, in the case that the school is going to be considering you for those types of scholarships, it's a good idea if you meet the threshold to submit. I think colleges are probably trying to figure out right now what happens with those scholarships and how they're going to evaluate students, because test scores are a useful tool in the admissions process, and they have there's a whole range of reasons that standardized testing is has unintended consequences in terms of educational equity and access, but so I think there may be a big shift in the coming cycle of how colleges evaluate it.
And do you think, Sabrina, like if someone had been rejected from a college, and I know schools usually accept, reject, or waitlist, is there any benefit in this environment to, if you were rejected, to ask for reconsideration based on people shifting around to different colleges, or is that a no-go?
That's a good question. I've heard that colleges are pushing more towards wait lists, like they're rejecting fewer students generally because they're building a longer wait list in anticipation that people won't come in the same numbers. Yeah. So my philosophy is it never hurts to ask, but I also think the same is if you're on the wait list, even if it's kind of a competitive school that hasn't accepted a lot of waitlist people in the past, like I would say, don't give up. And if you can keep your options open for as long as you can, you may be pleasantly surprised. And there's also a chance of getting more financial aid, kind of even if you haven't asked for it. A lot of colleges will kind of give an unsolicited additional award in times like these because they're trying to get people to commit to their school, and I've heard of that happening already a bunch in the last couple of weeks. So I'm telling people to wait to make the decision if they can, as long as possible, and to keep an open mind even over the summer if something changes and you get more information.
Wow, that's really good advice. I didn't know that, so I'm sure our families would like to hear about that too. Saving. So now we're in, again, a situation where there's some job loss or some job pause. What's your recommendation to families saving for college, say with small kids? Should they continue that, stop that? And then as a complementary question to that, savings or save for retirement? Which is the best decision for parents?
I think the rule of thumb for families is always, for parents, is always to put your oxygen mask on first before putting it on your child, the same way it is on the airplane. So obviously, if your family is having financial challenges right now, don't stress about your 2-year-old's 529. I think similarly, if your retirement savings are being impacted by this, and you're, coming up on that age, don't stress about your students, stress about yourself first. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that the price of college is really something that we don't know. It's been growing a lot recently, but like in 10 years, it may look a lot different. And we also know that students have a lot of options in paying for college. There's the grants and scholarships and loans, obviously, and it's important to contribute as much as you can. And so if you have the financial cushion, certainly my advice is save as much as possible for their education, but don't do it at the expense of these other priorities, which are potentially coming up sooner and more immediate.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. Can you talk to us a little bit, Sabrina, about Edmit, the company, your mission, and why you guys decided to partner with SoFi?
Absolutely. So our mission is to help families make smart financial decisions about college. We started the company because my co-founder and I were both working at universities, and we just saw the types of questions that families had and saw that it was increasingly hard to figure out how to pay for college and evaluate it in the way that you would another investment. And when you come to Edmit, you can sign up with some basic information about yourself and then get access to our cost estimates, which give you an estimate of how much financial aid and merit scholarships you receive from all the colleges in the US, and as well as data on what the graduates of those colleges earn by college as well as by major. So you can really see a full financial picture and kind of make your financial plan for what school makes the most sense, and as well as get recommendations and explore other schools that you may not have heard of. So that's what Edmit does. And we love SoFi. We love our partnership with SoFi because we know that you all have the same mission of helping people gain financial empowerment and independence. The college purchase is a purchase, and it's one of the biggest purchases that families will make in their lives. It's on par with saving for retirement or buying a house, and there's a lot of advice on those things out there. And so we're really excited to be kind of a complementary tool that helps SoFi members make the most of their money.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's one of the things that we see too here at SoFi is the need for the information, or the questions that we get, or the use on the site of calculators, calculating 1 year or 4 years. On the Edmit side, or when using Edmit Plus, have you done any kind of review on where people are spending most of their time, or what topics are kind of the top of the list that people look at?
Well, so we do, we have a lot of information on scholarships and financial aid, obviously, and how to kind of tease out what schools are gonna give you the most money. We also do a lot with financial aid appeals. So we help you look at what you could expect from a college and then what you got, and kind of interpret what's that gap and how could you maybe go back to the school to ask for more aid. But I do also think a lot of people love to do that scenario planning and think about, well, if I major in, like we were talking about engineering, or if I major in this other major, how does that financial picture look long term? And that's what we think is special about our approach, because there's a lot of sites out there to look for like those $500 scholarships, but at the end of the day, this is something that's going to be with you for like 10, 20, 30 years, and in actually your whole life. And so how can we give you a little bit of the numbers and give you a sense for what that long term looks like?
Is there any advice you have on scholarships? Is there any kind of strategy? There's a lot out there. I know that a lot of scholarships are very specific, belong to this club organization, have some type of relationship. But with all of, these individual scholarships, what's your strategy on approaching it?
The first strategy is really to focus on what the school is going to give you, because those tend to be the biggest scholarships. But once you've gotten a picture for that, I think it's important to weigh the cost benefit. So don't spend tons of time applying to all these scholarships that require essays that will only really give you, a couple $100 here and there. There's good scholarship databases kind of on the local level as well. Those tend to be less competitive. And so you can find the ones that kind of apply to you. And I would say don't ever pay for scholarship advice because that's kind of a source of scam where people will get charged for applying and then never see any money. So beware of that. All scholarship information should be free to you. So there's some of my tips. And I know SoFi is running an awesome scholarship competition as well.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing too that we wanted to mention is employer contribution. So a lot of employers have started offering, whether it be discounts on loans or a benefit or some type of matching contribution, whether it be for your own education or your family's education. So I would recommend that too to our audience, that they check in with their human resources department or go to the HR website and see what is there. Often companies may be running their own scholarship or have this type of matching program or discount program, which can save money, and families should definitely take advantage of, for sure.
Great point.
All right, well, I think that wraps it up for us today. I just wanted to remind everyone that as a member of SoFi, you get access to Edmit Plus as a complimentary benefit. So if you are not a SoFi member, register today on our website to take advantage of this amazing benefit. And that's at sofi.com/Edmit to learn more. And Sabrina, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today and talking to us about searching for college and paying for college in this really unusual time.
Thank you, Melissa, and good luck to everyone.